Just because a parent scolds you and you do not feel that fear, if you do not feel the impact of that scolding, then there's no real intrinsic value to what that scolding meant to be. That's to say that when your parents do not instill that fear, do not provide that urgency, the sense of importance to these type of values in a way that uses fear for the children to actually think about something mentally, it won't do any effect. Moving on straight into 5 layers of framing in this debate, right? So what will these values look like? A, that's to say these are not extreme values that are going to be pushed by extreme parents. B, that is going to be that this is the last resort. If parents can use other methods, if it works, then that can always be the case. But this will always be the last resort, and it should be using fear. C is that it's aligning with the morals and ethical principles, and that was given in the info slide. That means that probable use of fear in ethical yet effective manner, and regarding not like satanic or morally problematic values, but based on like basic religions and the push for good morals and ethics. That's to say, we do say that it could be a push, let's say, on Christianity, but to say that it's fine if it's the basic push, not some cult or an extreme version of Christianity, which is something else that is not other than to say like teaching to following the 10 Commandments or etc. Right? In a bit, parents are good at deciding and know what their children's is the best, right? That is to say that they have the incentive to teach and they have the incentive to use fear efficiently and decide on what level of fear they need, right? Last is to say fears. Those fears are reflective of what actual harms happen in society. The reason why American public schools, let's say, take kids on field trips to jail is to show how this is the real world and how if you do things like this, these are the crimes you commit, these are the impacts that happen to you. But before moving on to my preemptions, that POI.
Why can't it be teachers who use fear to instill values? Why does it have to be parents?
I think this like that's an exclusive case to say that if your parent has lived with you the longest, you're going to see your parent almost every day, way longer than let's say your teacher that you might see that changes every grade level, or teacher that changes after like your primary school education, secondary, tertiary education. All of these will change, meaning that at the very least the individual would trust the parent the most compared to your teacher. I think that's just intrinsically true on all sides, right? Our stance is to say why fear is needed and is far more effective, right? Moving straight into two preemptions. First is about indoctrination. This was already mitigated in my framing to say that indoctrination, even if it was to happen, would be for good morals. And it's something that is mentioned in the info slide. So we have the fiat to say that indoctrination most likely wouldn't happen and this is a last resort. And it's not going to be something that's morally bad, even if it did, right? The second part is about psychological trauma and harm. It's to say that parents are likely to recognize the level of psychological harm they can do. Unlikely, let's say, to like push, it's going to be very unlikely that they're going to push to the extent that op is going to frame or op is going to tell you, judge. That's to say that fear isn't the harm or like in it of itself. It's to say like just it's like an anger or defense mechanism. Like kindness is generally a good thing. An overload of anger is bound to be bad. Kindness is bound to be bad when there's an overload. It's this type of extent. What does this mean? It's to say that they have to prove that like children are likely going to face an overload of fear beyond what the mental capacity of a children they can handle, what they're capable of handling. This means that just because fear exists does not mean that it's going to be a psychological trauma or like some harm. It's to say that the overload of that where the parent is willing to push that to the biggest extent is something that's going to happen and most likely will not happen because the parent wants what's best for the child and will understand the psychological harm when they do so, right? Moving into the straight arguments about the better teaching of morality. What is the principle, the premise? It says that the morality should be taught, like how morality should be taught, right? Why is this so, right? Two layers to this. The fears are instilled upon children by parents that are reflective of what happens in society, right? It's to say that the idea is that if you steal, you go to jail. If you bully someone, you'll get in trouble. A bigger way to think about something that is bullying is to say, if you're targeting an individual, if you're like public harm, if you're like stabbing an individual, if you're hitting an individual out in public, obviously that's something now you're supposed to do, right? Children understand the things that are best if they're able to visualize these type of outcomes of their actions and understand the urgency with the use of fear. During childhood, learning about consequences to actions you commit are a very valuable lesson that is always had in your accountability of every action to do so, right? But why is fear so exclusive to this? Because when you are able to know that, when you know that it's taking someone's life, bullying someone or hurting people, extent can bring you down, i.e. jail, societal backlash. If you understand this and have this, like, if you can visualize this and the parent is able to instill this fear, if the parent is going to tell you, oh, this is something that's going to happen and it will bound to happen if you do these type of things, they'll understand how impactful it is and you'll take that moral value most likely to your heart, to your grave, because you understand that it's something so important, right? Moving on to the second layer about why fear is exclusive and most likely necessary in teaching in these values, right? Unlikely to, let's say, the understanding of concepts of consequences in the way society operates is to say, if children don't have consequences, at best, they view morals and ethical implications as one of thousands of other things their parent says is quote unquote important, right? Whether you're studying, sleeping, etc. All of these things grouped together and they're not going to consider it as much, right? It means that they're unlikely to remember these type of implications, right? Judge, if your parent says, oh, you should be sleeping early, etc., what happens? A lot of the children end up just gaming all night, staying up all night, watching phones, scrolling through reels. A lot of these things is going to be grouped in the same way unless you give the same weight and importance that you see in other societal aspects, right? This means that when parents don't teach this fear, but and when parents don't teach this fear, what's going to eventually happen is that society is going to do on a wrong run, right? But why is this so harmful? It's because children are unprepared. Children face even more psychological damage. This links back to the analysis we gave you on why instilling morals and ethical guidelines with fear in such a young age is really important. And last layer to this is to say that comparatively, if you were to make a mistake when you were an adult, you can't be as forgiving compared to when you were an adult, right? That's to say that when you're a child, when you're 12, people understand that you can still make that mistake and you have parents to support you. But when you're 18, you're alone. The law abides to you much more than you were as a child. That means that it's far more harmful and there's nobody really to support you in any way. This means that the impacts are twofold. It means that there's more effective community splits and there's better acting children for better sense of morality, right? Moving on to our second argument about there's better familial relationships. What is the premise to this argument? It's to say familial relationships are what is achieved through short-term conflicts, but when but of you feeling afraid is a natural emotion that gives you a warning to harmful actions. When you look back and see these mechanisms that help you become a moral person, that's good. Judge, what does this mean? It's to say that nobody really likes the grind. Nobody likes to work hard, but when they see the result that comes out of this, they're obviously going to be proud and understand that what they did was a good thing, right? So when the child looks and sees that their parent, even if they put this type of fear into them, it made them a better person. It made them be a better person in the future, got them to this part, they're obviously going to think it's a better idea, right? So moving into two layers about short-term and long-term analysis. The first is about if parents follow values of parents now have much more efficiency to teach their children a various amount of important things. If children follow you, like your values, you can go to church with them. If children are complacent with your standards, now you have the time to do what you want with them. A lot of these things lead to the impact of how parents are unable to understand these individuals and how children and parents are going to have a better familial bond. But additionally, on the exclusive point of long-term relationships, that's to say that note that sure, right now, you may not understand why your parents are instilling this fear on you. However, based on the premise that fear was an effective mechanism, making you a good person, you understand that long term, you are grateful, right? Like I said, the mechanization, no one likes to grind, but when children understand this, they're going to think there's better familial relationships, right? What does this mean? There's an impact of long-term support, care to the lowest, that helpful for your lowest lows, even when you become a young adult, and children are able to understand their parents with better relationships, for those of you are very proud to propose.
Joshua, when her father constantly uses fear tactics to instill the values of honesty in his son, warning of severe consequences for lying, the son will feel pressured and fearful, start hiding mistakes rather than confessing. As a result, trust between them deteriorates, and the son becomes adept at deception. When caught on a lie, he shows no remorse, as fear not understanding guided his actions. Just we reject the world where fear breaks down the relationships between parents and children. So proud to oppose. The three things that made speech. First, we move on to some points of framing and introduce our counterfactual. Two, move on to some rebuttals to Kevin, and lastly, introduce our two arguments. But first, let's look at some points of framing here. What do parents really look like? We think these are two people who, in most cases, assume that this is an average household, loves and cares for you, i.e. the child. And the fact that both sides are talking about how parents should instill values implies that we are premising on the parental care of children. But these are the most likely actors to give you unconditional love and unconditional positive regard, regardless of what your actions are. But why is this so? I think this is simply because there's a tight emotional bond as children. A child resembles their parents the most. But what do children look like? We think they're also vulnerable, but also flexible beings, and they're yet to form strong opinions like prejudice, meaning that they're open to more creative thoughts, opinions, etc. But how do they learn, and how do their identities form? And this comes from the people that they spend their time most with. I'll take it later. Is with their parents, right? I think they grow up watching their parents. It's likely that a lot of their values in the future comes exactly from what they learn and what they see their parents do. But three, what does the use of fear to instill values really look like? As proposition characterized and the info site states as well, it's making a child to fear something, to act upon a value. Notice how it's not the child that is actually realizing the importance of the value, but it's more of them being given the choice of being punished or adhering to that value. And there can be various ways to use fear, but this includes physical punishment like spanking, emotional damage by saying that the parents will leave the child if they act in a certain way. But also note that parents are not the only actors who instill value on their children. There can be teachers, other helpful adults, etc. So this point of framing will be crucial in the exclusivity wing in the first argument. But next, what is our counterfactual? We think we support a world where you learn about why a certain value is important by understanding, not where parents being where parents are being a role model to act upon the value first, having maybe like a deep conversation with a child, complimenting the child when he or she acts upon the value. But while our method work, I think opposition is really likely to like tell us it's not going to work because children have no
Go
like
on.
reason to. But here's some propensity analysis to counter that. We think a child looks up to their parents because they're the ones who fed the child, provide for the child, etc. Basically, they rely on the parent to survive. But two, the emotional bond leads the child to follow the orders of their parent. We think that in most ordinary households, it's very unlikely that they will be like the child and parent will be like neglectful toward each other. But lastly, we think that more analysis on the disobedient will and the even if case will be in our first argument. I think this debate was won on two metrics for the efficiency of teaching values, which is something both sides agree on as important but disagree on the method. But second, on the parent-child relationship,
on.
which is important for the child to have a happy/positive memory that is going to last throughout their lifetime. Before I move on, yes, I'll take your POI.
My mom is scary, but is she not a role model to me, or does she not explain moral intuitive values?
Right, I'll talk more about this in my second argument, but we think that the issue on your side, although we agree that's not necessarily going to be, oh, fear equal everyone, like children automatically like not neglecting what is being taught. We think that it is still true that in most cases it's extremely likely that the moment they hear a threat, like maybe, oh, you're going to lose your phone for 1 week, in the child's mind, it is not the value they learn that is in their mind, but what is in their mind is the fear of losing their phone. And I'll talk more about how that does not lead to the value being actually taught on your side of the house. But with that, I'll just move on to rebuttals. I think I have one problem with proposition case is that they never draw a clear picture of the use of fear. So we want to draw that picture for you. As I already told you in my framing, it looks like parents telling the child that they will spank them, telling them to get out of the house, and actually using consequences to trap them, i.e. negative reinforcement. But two, we think on the point on the indoctrination, how parents will recognize the psychological harms and like all consequences. We think that we can also have consequences, but in a positive loop. You can maybe compliment and give awards as a consequence, positive reinforcement instead of giving negative reinforcement like spanking or consequence on your side. And this is the exact analysis that Kevin can apply. But the rest of my rebuttals will be in my arguments. But I'm moving on to my first argument on the parental relationship with the child. The premise of this argument is that the relationship between a parent and a child will worsen when parents use fear. Why is this true? We think that for the use of fear to work, the person who's still trying to use fear should be
Go
an
on.
authoritative, intimidating person. No, thank you. If it's a funny clown who's trying to instill value, that obviously will not work, and you won't listen to them because you don't believe it is threatening. Then the parents have to be intimidating on side proposition's world for the child to listen or instill the value as proposition says. But also the punishment will make the child to somewhat despise the parents as well, i.e. when you get spanked, most children feel that it is unfair, and this is the same for adults, but child will be even more immature. So we can for children that are already disobedient, this implies that they already don't look up to you. But if you try to exert authority on them with consequences, it will be exacerbated. And even if the child listens to a parent, it will be to avoid consequences on side proposition, not because they actually learn the value. This is crucial because this exactly proves why instilling fear does not actually lead to long-term integration of whatever value they learn. But this too will not last when a child like hits puberty, right? We think it's very common for them to go against their parents and like i.e. rebel. But why is this not the case on our side? I think because simply as we told you in our counterfactual, we're using words, not like actions to teach the child, but because of positive reinforcement, the moment children are maybe like complimented for whatever good behavior they do, maybe if they are really honest and to their parent, even if they did a bad thing, when the parent compliments them, this is the kind of reinforcement, and this is how values are learned, not by simply saying, oh, I'm going to hit you, or I'm going to take your phone away if you don't listen to me. But with that, I'll talk more about this in my second argument on efficiency, and note that this is an even if argument. Even if parenting relationships argument is not true, or if this does not matter, we know the use of fear is an inefficient way to instill values. Why is this true? I think the use of fear means that whatever consequences is temporary, and that does not mean that the action, like maybe the action to not like is an action to not be scolded, right? Like if you steal, you may like not do it in front of your parents to not be scolded, but you don't really realize that stealing is bad, i.e. all the whatever value a parent instills, maybe if effective in the presence of a parent and the child does not actually learn the value of like honesty, and it will not be applied in the future. What does this look like? If a child comes home late and does not abide to the curfew of 10 p.m. with the instrument of fear, parents will just yell and ground the child. And even if the parent explains their decision to ground the child, it will be ineffective simply because the moment a parent relies on fear to get a child to act, the only thing in the child's mind is to not be scolded and not to get good consequence, but whatever explanation they hear about why they must be honest is actually not learned. And this deals with a lot of their first argument on how like fear instills values, right? We think without fear, children actually learn why a certain value is important and are likely to act on the value, no matter what who the situation is with. And I already told you in my framing, but we think this is obviously because children learn from observing their parents. And with my second speaker, we'll talk more about the cycle of instilling values by fear. Just we reject the world where parents use fear to instill values. So proud to oppose.
What consequences will follow the action I am about to commit? This is the question children on their side of the house ask themselves when they don't have a realistic guideline, a realistic consequence of committing the action. This is the inherent flaw of their side of the house. Their side's framing and counterfactual contradict. But two things to talk about in my speech. First, I'm going to talk about moral values, and second of all, I'm going to talk more about long-term familial relationships and as to why parents are the perfect actor and why parents should be the actor to be teaching this alongside with schools and whatnot, other institutions as well. But I want to quickly outline what their framing and counterfactual was before I move on to anything else because it was so outrageous. What was their framing? The framing was that, obviously, it's not the child that realizes the importance of the value. They're just given the choice to take that in or to be punished, and that they have a lack of choice. And also, their framing of and characterization of children are that they're inherently flexible and that they're able to be taken in of many values. And note that their counterfactual is that they support a world where you learn by understanding and taking parents as role models and simply taking in other values as well, learning to distinguish that and independently. But I have a response to this. Note that their framing knife is counterfactual. Because if children are really flexible and able to take in all values, we tell you that the vast majority of cases, children in their teen ages, for example, are most impacted by their friends, not your parents. They're impacted by many other factors, for example, like temptations in the internet and whatnot. Even if parents also impacted them, other people and the impact that they had on them will hinder a straightforward understanding of different moral values. But we also told you in Kevin's speech that why fear was such an exclusive and necessary thing to happen. I really don't think Annie realized the importance of this. Even though Kevin clearly outlined this, not right now. But what did Kevin tell you? We told you that fear was important because it clearly gives you a visualization of understanding as to what consequences will take place, what concept of confrontation consequences will take place, and the way society operates, right? Obviously told you that if children don't have consequences visualized and outlined in their heads, at best they view moral and ethical implications as one of the thousands of other things that their parents say is quote important. So just outlining as important, just seeing your parents live their life as an adult is not the best way possible, right? It's more of a necessity that parents tell you based on their experience as well, that as to what happens and in the real adult world, son, this is what happens in school, whatnot. This is all the things that we told you. But before I move on to my first contention, I want to take that POI.
Why can't compliments and rewards be a consequence of an action to visualize?
Wait, confidence and consequence. Obviously, consequence is better taught on our side of the house because consequences are better visualized. Because fear is a natural emotion that gives you a warning before you commit any other action. If parents clearly tell you that you're going to go to jail, if parents clearly tell you that, you're going to go to these types of juvenile concentrations, you obviously have a better understanding. But if you say compliments as well, that's your side of the house counterfactual, which wasn't, right? Obviously compliments, parents complimenting you for doing good actions, well, sure, you're going to feel good that you did good actions, for example, like giving your friend candy. But the thing is, there's much more bad actions that exist in the adult world. There's much more temptations that exist in the online world as well, in social media, the vast amount of institutions that children take place in. So what we tell you is that compliments to simply good actions also exist on our side of the house. We really don't know why that's an exclusive point on your side of the house. The first point on moral values, what was their side of the house saying in Annie's speech? I think they told you that fear-based parenting is discipline. I think first response to this, we really have no problem with discipline. Don't worry, guys. But if there really is no discipline at a young age, what really moral guidance you have to follow? Because if the majority of cases is that you spend time with your parents and that actor who spends most time with you doesn't give you any ethical guidelines via consequences of the bad actions that you're likely to commit as a child, there really is no good moral value that can be instilled from that young age. But we also told you that this is true for long term. What did our side tell you to this point in the long term? We told you that fear is exclusive and necessary in the long term too, because really we told you that children really don't know, and children really won't know how to act when society pushes fear on you, because fear is always going to happen when they're in your adult life as well. When you go to be an adult, you're probably going to have times where you're probably going to have times where you where you assault people, for example, if you're a bad person, like obviously when society like lashes out on you and puts you to jail, how are you going to act then? Because you really didn't have any like ethical guidelines via consequences, based on your young age. Instill fear in that manner, like you're obviously going to understand the implications, the moral implications that your parents' teachings have had on you. Their side is fear mongering. The fact that they characterize fear as something that's spanking kids when they do something bad is not basically the extreme portrayal of discipline. Because the portrayal of discipline on our side of the house was simply telling children or even scolding children when they did something bad. I think it was Kevin's example on conventional bullying and how conventional bullies continuously bully and continually repeat their actions and their wrongdoings. It's because probably the lack of like discipline that is on children, but also on the parents' lack of responsibility to tell kids what would happen if you bully, right? And the lack of consequence and the lack of ability for children to visualize the consequence of their problematic actions is what ultimately leads to the downfall of children in the future as well. But on second argument as to why schools shouldn't be the only institutions that are strictly teaching and fear mongering on children, I think this was Bill's POI, and I'm just going to get this out to you. It's simply the intuitive fact that on our side of the house, the motion really doesn't limit us from having schools teaching these kinds of values via fear either. Because basically, societal institutions like school, who are there to prepare you for the future, is there to prepare you for the future. So thus what this means is that the schools are probably going to teach you, or like schools are probably going to have disciplinary measures as well, right? But also we tell you that that's the same for parents as well. Because parents are also what constitutes your childhood life. It is also the parents' duty to teach you and discipline you. Not only discipline, but it's to outline you and to make you understand the impacts of what is going to happen based on your action. Like how big of an impact your actions can have to third-party actors, like your friends, your family, and like your close individuals. Like how you act is going to impact other people as well. The delta of this debate and the reason why we won from this constructive section was not because of like, oh, discipline and non-discipline, but was mainly because we had the both impacts of teaching moral values. I really don't see their positive case on conflicting or trying to like clash with their moral values argument. So this is an exclusive point, but also on long-term familial relationships, their point we took down. Because of all these reasons, I'm more than proud to stand on side proposition. Thank you.
Imagine that you grew up under a tiger parent who is scary with you. And basically make sure that you follow the consequences no matter what. It is very likely for 18 years, my childhood, that I will grow up resenting my parents. This basically means in the long term, these children will be falling apart with their parents, basically meaning in the long term, even if they know that this fear-based value instilling is for the good reason and for the best possible reason, they won't not be able to go up and maintain their relationship with their parents, right? Let's move on to some rebuttals on relationship. Firstly, when they grow up, they said that these children will understand, but basically this is not likely because of the fact that they resent each other. Because they know that if these kind of children grow up, they know that they know that there are other ways of teaching. For example, if you grow up and meet a friend that have grown up in a positive environment without threats and without taking away your phone and spanking, they'll basically resent their parents. Why did you have to do this for me? This is not the best way. This is not ethical. This is the way children might think, which is a reason even if they grow up, they might resent their parents, right? But even if these children do understand, it's not likely that they will able to remend their like relationship because of the fact that 18 years have been spent with this like threats and grounding and taking away phones. It's likely that in this long term of time, there will be a lack of empathy and open conversation within the parent and the child, which leads to a unmendable kind of relationship with these kinds of parents, right? Because of the fact, like even during like adolescence, these kinds of children with like who grew away from their parents will lean more to their friends and whatnot and their teachers and whatnot. It's likely that these kinds of people rely on friends more than parents, which is the reason that they're like on their side. It's basically impossible to mend their like a relationship back again, right? But thirdly, even if let's say that their relationship is mendable, these kinds of short-term harms are not something we can ignore, right? These children in their adolescence feeling that their household environment is super negative, feeling that they have no one to lean on within their homes, feeling that their parents are scary and are like bosses of their lives, and feeling that they have no self-authority. This is the kind of short-term harm they're willing to sacrifice for the long-term benefit of parents and child understanding each other. We believe this short-term harm cannot be ignored on our side of the debate, right? Which is the reason why we take the ground on relationships. But moving forward to efficiency, we basically told you that first, without parents, this kinds of like fear would not work, which is the reason why like we believe that like they basically didn't engage to this, but we basically said that these parents are the reasons that they have these kinds of authoritarian kinds of punishment. So basically, without parents, this kinds of work would not work. We want you guys to engage to this. But secondly, we also said that with fear, these people will not surely adopt these kinds of values. Why? Because, for example, if you say to your child, you cannot go on a school night or else you're grounded, versus you cannot go out on a school night because it's dangerous and you will be tired the day after and probably sleep in your like school, which is the better in which side would the child better understand the reason why they cannot go out on a school night. We believe it's on our side that the children actually understand and adopt the value on our side and actually implement, which will lead to a long-term harm, which I will like extend later on, right? They basically talked to you about the visualization of like a consequence. But we believe that firstly this is not like really a good thing, because basically the only reason a child doesn't want to do a certain kind of action is because, for example, stealing. They don't want to go to jail, so they don't steal. But on our side, during like open conversations and role model, children know that they should not steal because it causes third-party harms and because it's unethical. We believe just because a child doesn't want to go to jail and that leads to them not stealing, it's just like it's just a very shallow kind of mindset that they do not understand the ethicality of their actions and the harms they're causing, right? But secondly, they talk about like society pushing fears on them, and like on our side that children would not know how to deal with them. But basically, we talked about first the other places that fear can be instilled. For example, they gave the example of in America going field trips to jail. That's school, right? Basically, these kinds of fears can be installed in school. And secondly, it can be known by your own. For example, if you read a book and learn about, oh, I go to jail when I like steal or something like that. We believe this kinds of like fear cannot that is pushed in society can also be mutually exclusive on our side, right? So yes, I'll take your POI then.
We told you that we would give you the applications and the example of, oh, you go out on a school night. We would emphasize that it is dangerous. And then we would use, let's say, punishments on your side as like a last resort. It's the type of fear we want to address, is that it's dangerous. Those are the things we wanted to do. Please engage.
If it's dangerous, then basically it means that, okay, you basically talk about like being dangerous is like the reason why we cannot go out on a school night. The punishment that you get is that you're grounded. Because children are feared of that punishment, people won't go out. We believe that even if you engage to the child about the dangerousness, all the child would care about is being grounded on a school night, because that comes with a bigger impact on your side. But on our side, we basically tell the child with an open conversation why is it dangerous and why you cannot go out on a school night. We believe on our side the open conversation would be more like impactful to the children, right? Anyway, we basically told you that, okay, so moving back, that society pushing fear we can still like instill these kinds of values on our side too, which is the reason why we believe that on our side we have efficiency. And moving on to my third argument, which is basically the cycle of instilling values by fear. When our children are taught by fear, it's likely that this method will be instilled deep within them from a very young age, right? So children think this is a good way to teach and install others of value. It will likely lead towards these children growing up, becoming an authoritarian kind of person and teaching their children or like peers of value with fear. For example, in Korea, tiger parenting is very popular, which is a reason even in workplaces, there's a clear lineup system and a authoritarian system that you cannot go up against your boss and whatnot, right? We believe this is a reason why we cannot instill an authoritarian kind of method. But the problem with this is that the children that grows by fear would justify solving problems with fear. For example, making making people care like less about the feelings of others to be comparative. What we do is looking like open conversations, making sure that you understand how the other person is feeling and thinking, and are arranging solutions based on that. But on their side, it's more like children's like learning that okay, you don't need to care about thinking how the other people thinks or their situation. If you just instill like a punishment on them, they will fear them and like basically obey to you. That's the kind of thinking that on their side is very toxic, because of the fact that it's likely that these kinds of people cannot retaliate to higher authority, like even in like and this leads to further like social problems. For example, even in workplaces, you cannot retaliate to your higher boss. You cannot go against their ideas, and you cannot like have like innovation with them, which is the reason why we're so proud to.
Panel, I'm sorry, but I don't go and stab Joseph because I'm afraid of my mom. I do so because it kills Joseph. That's a terrific harm on its own. Side opposition neglects the incredible amount of self-recognition and the self-recognition that you learn with ethics when it's teached with fear and the implication that it brings, because it's so important, it's long lasting in your mind, and there's a value we're very proud to stand with on prop. Three things I'm gonna do in my speech. First thing, I'm gonna address some nitpicks on their alternatives. Secondly, for my first clash on family relationships. Secondly, on who teaches ethics better. First nitpick then, their main argument or counterfactual is that they have teachers and other alternatives of being a role model or being a better understanding of the person. First thing on teachers and other books and stuff like that. We have this too. I have no idea why this isn't symmetric. Like I think that's the rebuttal enough given. But secondly, teachers comparatively have much less time, resources, and generally less care about the children. They probably are underpaid already. They only make money out of grades only, not out of children's mentality or out of the children's mental capability in and of itself. All no idea why, even if they have things like teachers or books, I'm all no sure why this is more effective than teachers. But even if that was the case, we have this on our side as well. I'm unsure why this is exclusive. Thirdly, like parents are still role models and they still explain. Just because they teach with fear, I think they assume that those people don't explain. I'm gonna give you two analyses why they still have incentives to explain. Firstly, their rewards are symmetric. For example, if you help out an elderly person on the street and you do so because of a role model, you're still gonna get that reward. You're still getting compliments. Anyway, that's a I don't know incentive on both sides that incentivizes you to do good things. But secondly, parents are still role models. I have no idea why parents won't teach or understand or explain their actions, especially if they say that they're gonna come out of backlash. I just say, I'm gonna take it after my first clash. What this means that if parents are still role models and parents do explain on our side, just with the additional consequences and saying that it's more important because it is dangerous, and because it is dangerous, you should fear that. I have no idea why this is unsymmetric, so therefore either counterfactual is very uncharitable. So first question on family relationships. What's the premise and what is the contention here? They say that they have psychological damage and they have less trust and therefore they stick race relationships. I have is this. I'll take it after my clash. First problem I have with this is that only firstly, our huge mitigation already goes against this already. And we told you analysis why parents understand children the best. They're the best actors to do so insofar as you live with them for like 15, 17 years. So this is why family relationship or psychological damage is greatly mitigated, because parents still have the best incentives to go for like to teach a certain level of these, I don't know, these fear to their children to the best extent so they know them. But secondly, what we told you is that comparatively on their side, society is worse. In that, society isn't as accepting as your parents. If parents didn't teach you consequences, society will in much more damaging forms that you have never experienced before. So even if you take all the kids on the best case, on the long run, there's like significantly worse because you never understood consequences, you never faced consequences, but even if you did, they're likely to be much more damaging in society. Insofar as society isn't excessive, they're going to punish you in forms like cutting your waist directly and firing you for all of that. So on the long run, I'll like to emphasize that there's even much worse psychological damage and less trust. But lastly, this leads to my last point, that resentment will always happen anyways on both sides. In that, parents will always ban you from hanging out with your friends on a late night, even if you have consequences or not. Their side does not deny this. What this means is that if parents does ban you, you're still gonna hate your parents simply because you missed out the fun on the short term. Just because you have fear, just because you have damaging, I'm unsure why their side does not degrade family relationships insofar as that is part of adolescence. Parents, children, someone hate parents in the short term, but on the long run, that there's great amount of psychological relief when you realize the reason why you're this good in moral ethics, the reason why you are that, I don't know, proficient in like social skills is because of our parents. You're using our analysis of grinding. Just because like obviously you don't like to grind math problems in the short term, but when you get your mathness in the long run and see that it's very effective, this is the point in which you're satisfied yourself and you're satisfied that your parents push you as hard as you can. You want to do my second class? Sure.
Fear is such an efficient way to instill values, and children will be grateful for this as well. If the benefits are so clear as you characterize, why use this use of fear as a last resort?
Because like if there's other methods that can teach us more efficiently, I think we're fine to go with that. But the comparative here is that there's children and there's very important values that we're willing to teach with fear, and those are the values we'll teach with fear regardless of anything else. If it is very limited, if it is a very small value, like I don't know, like walking or whatever, or other values that parents teach, I think they're going to teach you other values. But I don't think it's up for side opposition to decide what is the best for children and what is the most important value that parents regard. I think that's different for every single parent, and we're fine to leave the parents up to that. That was in their framing as well. Third question, who teaches ethics better? Firstly, the contention here is that their side teaches ethics better because their side's children don't really learn the values, but just learn to avoid the fear from the parents. What is this? Why there are two analyses against this? Firstly, I'm unsure why this is better on their side, because if the analysis is that they only follow because of their parents' approval or disapproval, then like I'm unsure why children have incentive to do this or do good things or do good moral values outside of parents' approving gaze on their side anyways. So they identify the problem, so they don't really give a solution to it insofar as that's symmetric using their own logic. If it is true that you only do this because of your parents' approving gaze, you want your parents' compliment, you don't want your parents to do fear mongering to you, like obviously that also applies to their side. But you're unlikely to do good moral ethics outside of your parents' gaze. So I'm unsure why this is any better on their side. But B, I think they disregard the parents' the authority that the parents like have. Like if they see that, like obviously parents are the most important figures in your life and they have great influence on you. So if it is that mentally damaging as their side says, it probably means that it is even at a very worst case, even if you accept that mentally damaged point, even if I gave rebuttals to this, parents' reminder carries out in real life, and it's very likely that parents have a great amount of incentives to give you long-lasting implications of why this is so important. But lastly, I think our side teaches ethics because it is just because it sticks in your mind better. We told you there's 1,000 things going on in adolescent's life. There's a lot of things that adolescents are forced to go through, a lot of test papers, a lot of like drama in a relationship, whatever. But the most important thing here is that their side does not do this. Insofar, just because parents are role model, I'm unsure, and there was no mechanism why children are likely to listen to their parents. Anyways, we gave you a mechanism of why fear is an inherent human trait on its own, and you have psychological needs, and it's human nature to avoid this in the first place. This is somewhat of why our side wins. Firstly, even if our worst case, even if it's only based on values, and even if it's only based on avoiding a parent's fear, we're fine to accept that if it means that children does not do very bad things and remember this in the long term. Anyways, we're very proud to propose.
I want to ask a single question to put down most of proposition size case. As I asked to John as well, if their benefits are so clear, why use it as a last resort? Because the thing is, this last resort framing given by Kevin premises on the harms of the use of fear. If the benefits of use of fear from proposition is all true, that implications can only be remembered through fear, that children will be grateful to their parents in the long term, we don't see why they aren't using this as a primary measure to teach or instill values. The reason this is a last resort is because proposition themselves recognize the damages caused to the child and their relationship with the parents. Sean also mentions in his POI response that there's other methods that may be more efficient in some other cases. But then the thing is, their framing wasn't just about them being fine about this method being up to the parent whether they want to use fear or not, because Kevin was pretty clear in his speech, because he is a good PM speaker, that they will use this as a last resort. The last resort framing is a self-mitigatory framing that concedes to most of our case and makes the delta in this debate extremely small. Very proud to oppose. Two clashes that I would like to address in this speech. Firstly, in terms of the efficiency of instilling values, and secondly, in terms of the parent-child relationship. Firstly, in terms of the efficiency, before any direct response is judged, if it's difficult for you to envision what exact use of fear that we are talking about, that's not your fault. because Kevin never drew us a clear picture of their world, and Joseph simply asserts that this won't be about spanking, but this will be only about scolding. So the question is, what exactly does the scolding look like? How exactly will these parents try to use anxiety or
Why?
fear for their benefits, right? Because what we told you right now was that this sort of scolding, or what a proposition says world is going to look like, is the threatening of the child to maybe leave the house if they don't act in a certain way, to provoke an anxiety, I want to make that very clear in terms of the characterization. Then moving on to their point, what did they say about this? They said the consequence is important to remember the implications. This was the biggest prop push and the premise. We agree that consequences are important, but this does not prove the exclusivity of their case. Consequence can be also existing in a positive form as well. Rather than threatening a child to do something, you can promise the child for a reward, and the consequence analysis from Kevin applies the exact same. Joseph says that rewards cannot help children to visualize, but we are unsure why this assertion is true, because the child can still visualize themselves getting complimented and recognized from their parents, and insofar as parents are the biggest influencing actors of a child's life, that's going to be what the child wants the most, recognition from their parents, and that's exactly the consequence that we can give to you by instilling these values. Notice how we used exactly proposition size mechanism to prove how proposition size case lacks exclusivity. The reason this response is important in this debate is because this allows the weighing to be more on the parental relationship. Talking about exclusivity, the reason why we also mentioned about other actors like teachers was to also show that it does not necessarily have to be the parents who use fear, even if their benefits of fear is true. Parents, as Kevin correctly frames, are the exact people who always stands beside the child, and therefore the impacts will be much bigger when parents are the villain of the story. We can do equally of a job in instilling values as they say, given the consequences analysis and whatsoever, but without the backlash of worsening parental relationships, and that is the exact reason why we are much better. Before moving on to the next point, sure, I'll take your point.
Who are you to decide where different parents draw the line, or draw the line on what is considered as a last resort for millions of different parents around the world?
Well, like, if you yourself cannot characterize what a last resort is, like, I don't know what your case is, right? Because you said that it's going to be used as a last resort, like after using all the things that we gave you as a counterfactual about. So I think that pretty much concedes to the fact that we have a much more efficient case, and that if our efficient case does not work, you want to use fear. We prove to you why that use of fear causes backlashes, and that may not be a good solution to resolve situations. The next thing that proposition side tells you is that fear is a natural emotion for one person to be a better person. Something being a natural emotion does not necessarily mean or equate to the fact that that emotion is something that's beneficial for you. Fear is natural, but the emotions following fear can also be natural. That looks like resentment to your parents who threatened you, who caused you to be anxious. We don't think that it's likely for the children to exactly love their parents equally in their world as well. But then the last thing they tell you is that in the long term, children will be grateful, so that there will be this short term, long term analysis. This point from proposition is a great example of the problem underlying their entire case. Most of their points are merely assertions. They assert the fact that children will be grateful in the long term, that they will recognize the importance of values later on, but don't prove why that is a likely scenario. A more likely scenario that we gave you, and this analysis connects to the second clash as well, is that children will grow negative emotions about their parents and them having permanent trauma of this use of fear. We frame to you on how children are vulnerable beings. These children fear a monster under their bed and have nightmares about them. Then just imagine what their emotions will be like when their parents say harsh things, spank them, and leave psychological and physical damages to these children. This problem worsens during puberty as well, where a sense of autonomy grows and the child tries to be their independent self. This is the period where your sense of rebellion grows. We say that this problem will exacerbate when the parent forces and threatens the child to act in a certain way. And notice how this puberty is a natural phase that everyone goes to as hormones come out, and therefore this goes on to prove how there will be rebellious feelings. Then talking about these sort of parental relationships, let's move on to the second clash on the parent-child relationship. We told you that parental relationship will worsen on proposition side's role. Then proposition side responded on how our counterfactual can be symmetric and that parents can still be role models no matter what. Can an actor who threatens you, cause you to be anxious, also be the exact side of person that you look up to. We don't think that that's really likely. Our role model analysis was the propensity as to why there are certain emotional bonds that you form while you grow up watching your parents' actions or whatsoever, and why that will ensure our counterfactual to be efficient, while why children will listen to the conversations with the parents whatsoever. But then secondly, proposition side also tells you that society is much more damaging. This point comes from John as well. If that's exactly the case, if society is much more damaging, parent-child relationship is even more important. If everyone's trying to use fear to you, at least you want someone to stand next to you and support you. This analysis from Sean reinforces the importance of our case. What is the final weighing then? Even if the use of fear is an efficient way to teach value, it is still bad if it worsens the parent-child relationship, because as they say, there's a harsh reality, and we want someone to at least rely on and get help. That is the reason why parents are so important. Very proud to post.
On top of my speech, I just want to start with some clarifications because I think side proposition at this point is still pretty confused about what our counterfactual looks like. So let me just clarify what our counterfactual really was. Two things in our counterfactual. First, we're promoting communication between parents and children when resolving conflicts, i.e., when teaching honesty, you talk with your parents about why it is important and why your action was dishonest and why that is obviously bad. But it had a second part to it, which was positive reinforcement. This means that a parent will maybe compliment their child when they reflect the value they taught them, like maybe honesty, i.e., if a child tells the truth to them that they stole something, we'll reward them with compliments or other means like buying what they want or giving allowances to them and whatnot. So some kind of positive reinforcement for the child to actually learn the value. With that, I think I have one issue coming from an issue with side proposition because they don't really show us what using fear to instill value looks like. It was very confusing what their side is supporting. I.e., they did not tell us the process that will be used when fear is used. And we get this one liner that fear will be used as a last resort from Kevin. But at the end of the day, I'm very confused as to what proposition side really looks like. And even if it was not, as Bill told you on the top of his speech, proposition's logic is quite inconsistent given that they assert using fear is effective to instill values, but also tells us that it is only used as a last resort. I don't see why they would not use such an effective method in the first place. Two ways this debate will be judged. Two metrics. First, on the efficiency of teaching values. Two, on the parent-child relationship. With that, I'll just go into my first issue on the efficiency of teaching values. They tell us that the use of fear leads to deterrence as they have a framework about like what is right and wrong, right? We give you two responses. First, on discipline, we told you that the moment there's some kind of this consequence instilled, it creates some kind of fear which deters from the child from actually responding. But two, we told you, we give you even if analysis, like if parents explain why, even if they explain why something is wrong, like whatever behavior, the moment your parent uses consequences, like explaining even if they explain stealing is wrong and then takes away your phone for a week, your mind goes on that phone that is gone. So not whatever your parent just taught you. And I think this is really crucial analysis because this deals with like what Sean told you about how we assume parents don't explain their actions, but we actually gave you analysis to even why your side is bad, even if parents explain their actions. But second thing, what did we tell you? We told you that like in our metric here, we told you that compliments will obviously will lead to positive reinforcement works as children will learn to be honest with first direct results from parents, i.e. the rewards they get, but second with positive results in the social world when interacting with friends and others when they use the value in the future. And this I think deals with their point on how like a compliment only makes people feel good, but there's only like more bad actions in the adult world and whatnot. But two, we gave you three reasons why children will abide to their parents. I said this in my speech. Jiseo told you this and Bill also told you this. So let me just reiterate. First, we told you there's a reliance on them because which directly results in some kind of respect they have for the parent, and obviously because they rely on their parents to like survive. But we told you that even if there wasn't this kind of respect, this kind of respect, I think that we told you that there is still likely that parents will listen children will listen to someone on our side, and we told you that it's pretty likely that if there's disobedient children exist on both sides of the house. But we told you that there's observational learning, so you learn by watching the parents. So if your mom is really honest and teaches a child that, it's likely that you will also do so. But lastly, we told you that you learn the most from the parent, i.e. the person you spend the most time with, and this is why children are likely to abide on our side when we do not use fear. But two, what do parent-child relationships look like? This is a wing here. Which side is more toxic? I think on our side, the education process looks like opening conversations, leading by example, complimenting good behavior, and making sure that the value is understood. But on your side, we think that on their side, when they use punishment, it is likely that punishment, like whatever they're scared of, is likely to be more impactful So the moment they hear from their mom that, oh, you're going to lose your phone, the whatever their mom taught them will not come in. And at the end of the day, what goes in their mind is just trying not to get the consequence. So I think side opposition perpetuates a world where children just instill, like symbolically, the values to avoid consequences. And I think this is more like clear that we take this debate. Thank you.
If the benefits are so clear, why use it as a last resort? That was the question Bill asked us. Our response was in our case. But different parents under different measures that they use should not be decided on their side of the house. Who are there to their side of the house to say and to decide where parents draw the line, or to use fear as a last resort or not. Last resort didn't mean you're only using it for the worst case. And we told you that parents can choose different methods of different parentings. But we told you that the underlying factor, the most important and impactful factor of parenting was the fact that the usage of fear was necessary throughout. That was the analysis that we gave on our first argument as well, and the fact that they know that this was very harmful. But we told you that it was just different by case, but also that if I didn't know that Jill would be greeting me when I robbed the gum from the store, I'll be robbing gum from the store, just like how we robbed the benefit of moral values, so their side couldn't have it. And the fact that we robbed the benefit of parental relationships, so their side couldn't have it. We push that without consequences that are visualized and experienced at a young age, without me being to understand the moral values and why you should or should not commit them. You really could not know, it really should not, like you really won't be able to know, right? Then basically main two things to do. First, I'm going to holistically assess this debate. But second, I'm going to analyze their winning path, why they think they won, and why that really isn't true. Then first of all, let's just holistically assess this debate. This debate was a debate between being a good person or wishy-washy counterfactuals, because we really don't get a clear counterfactual signposted at the top of the speech. The counterfactual, according to Annie's speech, was having children take in parents as role models, learning from their actions. You know, let's say like you do compliment. The PY to my speech from Bill was that why can't we compliment children? I think I'm going to be too derivative as I say this again. But let's say their side's world are other alternatives to teaching moral values other than fear, like compliments. Sure, good job. You gave $1 to a homeless person and you helped your friend, and like you didn't rob your store, so like your parents gave you a candy, right? This like sure, it was very good, right? The innate tendency to a human child who is characterized as flexible and prone to multiple viewpoints and influences as characterized as theirs at the house are going to fall into temptations, are going to fall into bad actions that they're going to commit. So if their counterfactual is really, if their real entire like counterfactual case is really true on the fact, and if their rebuttals on our side of the house, on the fact that children aren't going to take in like the moral value that you shouldn't commit and intrinsic value, but rather are only going to look at punishments, that's the same on their side of the house. When parents award you as a child who really don't steal like from the store candy, that's also going to the child not caring about robbing from the store and all those moral values, but only caring about the reward. We really don't see the delta here. But B, the benefits that their side outlined were only mitigation. We really see no positive case. Their only approach is using other measures like compliments, but we really don't think that's exclusive to the rest of the house. We told you that not only the inherent fact that parents are going to have to use fear-based parenting to instill certain values, the inherent fact that children don't always commit good actions was what washed it out as a whole. 2, why do they think they won, and why is that false? Their side thinks they won by pointing out the absurd thing. Their side think they won by rebutting the parent-child relationships now in the whip speech. This abuses their fiat, just like how their side paints like fear-mongering as abusing children, and in the extreme, we told you that this wasn't true. Parents aren't likely to abuse and intimidate their child to the extent where parent-child relationships deteriorate so much. Can you have good relationship with your parents if you don't have good footing with them in the first place and follow the flexibility of influence by other factors on their side of the house? You really cannot have that. So their side needed to respond to that first before being able to confidently observe by their side of the house by saying, oh, like parent-child relationships would deteriorate. If parents are that psychologically damaging like their side says, you're incented to carry this out in like basically in real life as well. But B, according to the alternative on compliments and like doing good things, why would they care about the intrinsic value of kindness? If they can say that people don't care about bad rules because they only care about the punishment, I can watch that their alternative. I have the same dependence on rewards happens on their side of the house as well. The real side that won this debate was basically on the positive case that we pushed to you. The analysis on our first and second argument that was largely washed out by me and all the 3 speeches of the rebuttal. So proud to propose.